Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Small Groups. We're going to continue our series, A Good Picture, talking about building strong families. And Pastor Jordan brought a great message this Sunday that gave us a really good contrast between the two different ways of raising kids, and brought it out of 1 Samuel. And it was just a great example of two different ways that we tend to raise our children, and brought out some really great points. And so we're excited to be talking with you guys about that this evening. For those of you that don't know who we are, my name is Blaine. This is my wife, Leah. We've got 3 kids that are all grown and out of the house, except for Traven that still comes and eats my supper every now and then. And
we have a grandbaby coming, our first grandchild, little Aria, will be here in September. So we are so excited about that.
Yeah, super excited about that. So let's talk about the message and talk about the 2 ways of raising kids. Basically, what we talked about on Sunday was that we have 2 ways, and that is we either give God to our kids or we give our kids to God. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great way to talk about the 2 different examples of raising kids. Leah and I, as we were talking about this, we were just kind of going over different things that we have encountered in raising our kids and situations. And I think in the aspect of giving God to our children, it's real easy for that to become a check box. We check off the box. Did we do this? Did we do that? And as Christians, there are things that we have to do. And as parents, there's things that we have to do to raise our kids the right way. Mm-hmm. But if we're not careful, it can become simply just a checklist, which turns into a religion, turns into legalistic. Yeah. And I think that that's a huge reason why we have so many young people that are walking away from their faith, questioning their faith, because it simply becomes something that is just done, and it's a to-do list, it's a requirement, instead of focusing on building a relationship with God. And I think that's the key thing in raising kids, is you always need to come back to, are we helping our kids develop a true relationship with God, or are we just doing things to look good in public? Yeah. Because our lives in public should reflect what we do in private. Yes. And I think sometimes that is where the conflict arises, is that we are not living the same in public. We're not living the same on a Sunday morning as we do throughout the rest of the week. Yeah. And so
I think like what you and I talked about earlier is, and we've talked about this even like being on the worship team, that when you go into church, when you attend church, or whether it be on a Sunday morning or Wednesday, it is to be an overflow of what your daily life is. That's right. Not just a thing that Sunday morning we go to church, Wednesday we go to church. It's an overflow of your walk with God and your time of worship and your time with Him. So it's definitely a day-to-day relationship with God.
Most definitely. And I think, the difference that we see is Eli with his sons, there was very much the focus on, this is what we do. Mm-hmm. And it all became performance-based. It became actions. It became a to-do list. And that relationship with God was never built. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not things that we do. There are principles that we have to govern our lives by, and that we also have to raise our kids with. But we cannot allow that to be the focus. We have to remember it's all about a relationship with God, building that relationship with God. So, and then on the contrast, you have Hannah and her husband that focused on their relationship with God. And that was their focus, was getting their kids to follow God and have a relationship with God. And what comes to my mind on that is being authentic. Now, when we talk about being authentic, that doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. But being authentic in your relationship with God will carry on to your children. Mm-hmm. And part of being authentic is your kids seeing you mess up, because they see it. Yeah. We think we can hide it from them sometimes, but let me tell you, kids are smart, and they catch all that kind of stuff. So when we do mess up, I believe it's very important that we do the right thing in asking for forgiveness, apologizing, making that situation right, so that our kids see us not as being perfect, but as being real, and they get to see us handle those situations when we mess up and how we go about doing that. And I think that's just a huge thing is being authentic. Leah and I are not perfect by any means. And one thing that I felt have always really tried to instill in my kids is the importance of their relationship with God.
Yeah.
We go to church as a family. We do things. We go to church on a regular basis, go to meetings, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you have to decide: are you going to follow God?
Yes.
And as parents, our job is to help them in that. And when they're young, we're setting examples for them, telling them, hey, do this. But as they get older, it begins to transition into them having to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be there to help support that. Sometimes that means that we have to step back a little bit and give them some room to make decisions on their own, to do things on their own.
Yeah.
And really, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is really trusting God. And that's why you give your children to God. It is trusting God
Yes.
with your children.
Yes.
Because, man, it can really stress you out sometimes, even as your kids get older and become adults.
Yeah.
And the old saying, the older we get, the more we appreciate our parents. And I can tell you that's true, because sometimes I think I put my parents through more stress after I moved out of the house than when I was living there. So really, when we give our children to God, what it causes us to do is it causes us to relinquish the control.
Yes.
And give it to
That's
God
absolutely right.
and the Holy Spirit.
And that's tough.
That is real tough sometimes.
I think it's tough. It's probably tougher for a mom, I feel like, for a dad. I mean, it maybe depends on the personality, but I think moms we get so concerned about our children and how they're doing in life. It's just that nurture in us, is that caretaker that God's given us, personality wise, and it's easy to want to control. And it's when they're little, you're taking care of them. You take care of them, and you tell them what to do and what not to do. And as they get older, you have to begin to give them the wisdom to make the decisions, but let them make the decisions and trust God. Give them to God.
Yeah.
Trusting that what you've instilled in them as young children on a daily basis is going to come to fruition in their adult life.
Because they are going to mess up just like we do. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do things that they're going to regret, things that they know that aren't right. But just like we've had to go through that, God has always been there, and God has always been faithful.
Yes.
So really, giving your children to God is trusting Him and living your life real and living your life authentically. Yeah. And I think that your children will catch that, and that will carry on to them. And so those are kind of some key things that we took away from Sunday. So,
and this message was so good. Sunday's message was so good. If you haven't listened to it, if you weren't at church, I encourage you to go to our Facebook page, pull that up, listen to it, because Pastor Jordan's message was just phenomenal on that.
Very good.
So we really encourage you. But we've got some questions for your small group that we want. Got 3 questions that we'd like for you to discuss during this time. Number 1 is, if you were raised in a Christian home, was your upbringing more of the check the box religious duty, or was it an authentic day-to-day relationship? So that's the first question. Number 2, if you are currently raising children, are there areas that you see that need to be changed in order to truly give your children to God? And number 3, empty nesters, which is where we're at.
Yeah.
What does it look like to give your adult children and grandchildren to God? And that's, Blaine and I are in the thick of that right now too, guiding our children, because your role as a parent changes when they move out and become adults, but you're still their parent. Yeah. And there's still wisdom to be imparted to your children. And so that's something we're having to walk through right now, and learning. And so those are the 3 questions that we'd encourage you to visit about in your small group.
Yep. Hope you guys have a great evening, and you guys go enjoy these questions.
Yes.
And can't wait to see what happens in your small group.
Yeah.